am William Jamar Wright.
And I'm Hattie.
And this is our podcast, HattieJo. And how's it going, Hattie? How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a little hot out. Sweating a little bit.
It's getting to be that time of the year. It's middle of August.
Middle of August, which means football season is right around the corner.
And you know what that means?
What does that mean?
Cheerleading season.
Cheerleading season. Our residential cheerleader here. This actually brings up a great point, and kind of the topic of this podcast. So earlier this year, there was actually a huge controversy with the Washington R's.
And is that a football team?
That is the football team. That is a football team in the National Football League. I didn't say their mascot's name because it's actually a racial slur for Native American Indians, and out of respect for Native Americans and their culture.
They're the R's now.
I try my best not to use that racial slur, just out of respect. Like, I don't like when people use racial slurs, and
so this brings up a side point. Like, would it be better to just refer, like, there's no mascot, like the team from Washington? Because I feel like ours is still just like.
Yeah, that's a great question.
But that's just.
We can just say the NFL, the Washington, the team in Washington.
The team in Washington.
The NFL team in Washington. Well, they actually, they sent their cheerleaders, and they basically, as a part of their, like, being on the job for them, they sent them overseas with some season ticket holders, and they had the cheerleaders dancing and, like, doing things that they were very uncomfortable doing, and they said, hey, we're not going to give you, they basically put them on the flights and took their passports. And it's a situation where, like,
took their passports.
Yeah, the girls felt like they could not say no. And it was just a very bad situation, and it kind of got, it was in the news, in the sports media news, and one of the questions that kind of arose out of this situation was, is cheerleading, like, do we need cheerleaders anymore?
That's a great question, and that's kind of why the joke at the beginning of the podcast about cheerleading season is there really isn't a cheerleading season.
Well, there is competitive. I feel like there is competitive cheerleading. But
it's usually distinct from football season.
Is it really?
Yes.
Huh.
So, just another layer of the joke. But yeah. So, usually, for competitive teams that also cheer for their football program, their competitions will be offset so that they have more time to practice and prepare for the competition than time being spent doing all the football stuff. Because, as you know, football games take a long time. There's a lot of pregame stuff that goes into it. So not only is game day a significant portion of time, but then preparing the timeouts, making sure everybody knows how to do the flags, making sure they can tumble, making sure all the formations are correct, all the stunting, if your team does stunting, is correct. And those can be specific to football, and what they do in competition will be different from that. Okay. So it might be that they do certain types of stunts and certain types of tumbling and stuff with the flag, but it might be to a different piece of music, different order. There might be a different, like, some of the stunts might be the same, but there might be other stunts. So having competition the same time as football would be detrimental because that would just be too much to practice and rehearse for.
Gotcha. So for the sake of our arguments, we are not talking about, like, competition cheerleading, because that is a highly skilled and a highly competitive college sport, athletic sport, and those women put in a lot of work and effort to be able to compete at a high level.
And men. There are many competition cheerleading squads that are men and women. Co-ed. Yeah. That's the word I'm looking for.
So this is not in any way talking about like those competition
that sport.
That sport. But just specifically for like sporting events like football, basketball, like are cheerleaders like necessary? Like what do they do?
Like, what do they bring to the table in that regard?
So it's funny, like, I have always had...
an obsession with the cowboy cheerleaders?
No, I wouldn't say an obsession. But just...
But that's what you were thinking about?
Well, no, like, an infatuation.
A love of
yes,
the cowboy
a love.
cheerleaders.
Well, not even just cheerleaders in general.
Yeah.
I think cheerleaders... Like, I've always had cheerleaders, like, not necessarily up on a pedestal, but, like, definitely I've held cheerleaders in high esteem. And I have no rationale for it. There's, like, no rationale whatsoever for the reason why I think, like, I held cheerleaders on such a pedestal. Like, it honestly was just, like, a label of, like, hey, like, the majority of, and this is a time where I wasn't as critically thinking about like the things like that were going on in the world. Mm-hmm. But like I thought of cheerleaders as like if you were a cheerleader, that mean like you were hot. If you were a cheerleader, that meant that like you typically like you were probably one of the more popular people at the school.
Yes.
Like,
so I was
a
just
lot of
say,
status.
I think the reason that you held that belief, and I think a lot of people have that belief here and today, kids and adults, is because it's associated with a certain status, right? Just like a lot of people buy certain fancy cars, maybe not necessarily because they particularly love that car, but because it's a status symbol to other people. A lot of girls go out for the cheerleading squad. They may not be very coordinated, they may not really care that much about cheerleading, but they care about the status that accompanies being a cheerleader. I'm not sure where or how that started, but I do think that the sport of cheerleading, or the concept, not the sport of cheerleading, but the concept of having female dancers at a male-dominated sporting event has roots in, like...
the patriarchy.
Yes, the patriarchy that exists. And
yes.
I will say... I don't necessarily... So to short answer your question, I'm just going to dive in with my opinion. I do not think that cheerleaders are necessary. I think... So 2 quick bullets. We can unpack this. It's going to be a talk. But 2 quick bullets. My first 2 points are many sports, such as baseball, hockey. Well, I guess hockey does have some dancers. I have a friend that's on the Colorado Avalanche, like, dance thing.
Yeah,
but like, there's many
crowd,
sports...
Like,
there's people in the crowd, but I feel like in baseball there are no cheerleaders.
No, they're definitely not.
And it's perfectly fine. At the Olympics, there's many, many sports, and there's no cheerleaders, and it's perfectly fine, right? Like, everybody loves watching Olympic basketball. Everybody loves watching the World Cup, right? There's no cheerleaders at these things, and it's still an exciting, wonderful sporting event to participate in. The second thing is, I don't want to detract from the fact that I do find organized dance performances, so this is that second bullet, I find them entertaining, and I enjoy watching them. So just like I enjoy going to the ballet and watching a very athletic, very skillful, rehearsed dance is pleasing and entertaining to me, so is watching a group of dancers or a group of cheerleaders during a halftime performance. Like, I do find that entertaining. Okay. And so I don't want to come off as saying, like, oh, they're not important because it's not entertaining or because they're bad or whatever. I very much find them entertaining, but I feel like they don't necessarily add to the... Like, I don't go to a football game to watch the cheerleaders.
Yes.
Or maybe I do because I was a cheerleader and I don't know about football. But, like, just kidding. Most people don't go to a football game to watch the cheerleaders. They don't go to a basketball game to watch the cheerleaders. And so I think if they weren't there at all, not a whole lot would change. Like,
well, I think that's part of what we're like unpacking. So for you as a cheerleader, like, Did you feel like you made a difference in the game?
So I will say, so as soon as I just said that, not a whole lot would change. I don't think a lot would change in terms of most of the fans in the stands watching this sport. I also don't feel that as a cheerleader I made a whole ton of difference on the sport or like the game.
The competition.
Or like the outcome of the game. I do feel like the crowd involvement really helps Duke basketball. Like I think that Duke basketball has a home team advantage. But I don't attribute that, like, my best skill that I developed in cheerleading was being really good at anticipating what cheer the countdown crazies were going to start, or the Cameron crazies were going to start next. Because it's a bad look if, like, the audience is cheering, like, an organized cheer, and 5 repetitions in, the cheerleaders are like, oh yeah, go Duke, go Duke. Like, the cheerleaders need to be on that pronto. So it'd be like, I'd start to hear a little wisp, and then I'd be like starting the cheer, so that it kind of sort of looked like we were leading it, as in cheerleading. So I do think that that's one small way where I felt that I did have an impact on the game, was just by being part of the Cameron Crazy experience. Not that I was really directly, but I think that, like, if all the stands in Cameron were silent, that would be a very different and less advantageous environment than the Cameron as it is today.
Yeah, and I don't, like, so I would like to make the distinction that, like, I do believe in home field advantage. That is, like, that I do believe in that, and I do believe, like you just said, like, teams, like the Cameron Crazies, they have a huge impact on, like, our Duke men's basketball team. And, like, when there's a huge crowd and you're playing in front of a huge crowd as a former athlete, that it's kind of like, it's funny, I had a class my freshman year, and we actually discussed this in the class. Like, for entertainment or sports, does having a big crowd, like, does that affect the outcome? Or have an influence on the game? And I would say 100%. But I think, I don't know, like, if cheerleaders, first of all, I am paying very, very little attention, unless you, like, go down on the field or something like that.
Which is, like, few and far between.
For homecoming, I am not paying
any attention
to what the cheerleaders are doing. And it's not because, like, I don't respect the hard work that they do. Like, I was over in Wilson today, and all of the cheerleaders are in there preparing and working for the upcoming season.
And the tryouts are happening soon.
Yeah, and I realized that, like, they put a lot of effort and work into, like, being cheerleaders. There's a lot of travel involved. So I recognize their hard work to become cheerleaders. But I think as I'm sitting at a game and I am entertained by the competition, nothing the cheerleaders do, like, catch my eye. If there's, like, a break, or I will say if there's a break and then I watch the cheerleaders and it's like, oh, Hattie, like, they do not look like they're in sync here.
Yeah, and that's not a positive thing.
No, it's not a positive thing. Like, I do it to see, like, are they in sync? Like, what is, like...
But let me put it to you this way. If they weren't there, it's not like you'd be like, oh my god, this is timeout staying forever. Like, especially in today's day and age with all the technology and on the phones, like, I don't think that anyone will feel less entertained or more bored during downtimes of the game if the cheerleaders weren't there.
True.
I do think, so I definitely, going back to your discussion of home field advantage and talking about the Cameron Crazies, I do think that cheerleading, especially being a part of it at Duke, because we did not have a competitive cheerleading program. So literally our only purpose was to promote the school and to be adding excitement at sporting events or donor events, other types of sporting events. So I do feel that we had a value in thinking about the collegiate experience. Like, I just thought about, if the cheerleaders weren't there, how would that impact things? And I think that during the actual game, there would be very minimal impact. But I do think that you know, it adds to the overall experience. I remember my mom talking about, she went to Purdue, and game days were like awesome. And, like, just a huge event, and, like, the band would come through the whole campus, like, really early in the morning. Like, everybody would get all excited. Like, the cheerleaders are there. Like, so I think that, like, if you think about, if the band, like, didn't do any of the pregame stuff, like, that's significantly less, like, excitement leading up to...
So are you saying that, like, the band and the cheerleading are the same?
No. I'm just trying to give a more easy-to-understand example.
Okay.
So, I guess to specifically answer your question, I think the band is much more important to that,
the game atmosphere.
and to the game atmosphere than the cheerleaders are.
Yes.
Like, if you took out the cheerleaders, I think the game atmosphere would decrease slightly. I think if you took out the band, it'd decrease a lot.
Yes. Well, it's interesting to think about that, because, like, in the NFL, like, there are no bands.
But in the NFL, they have, like, the music on the loudspeakers, like, they have stuff going on to increase and to get that atmosphere of... So I think that right now, because it's been a tradition for so long, cheerleaders do have a function of providing that collegiate atmosphere and making it feel like you're at a college athletics game. Whereas, like, if you took that away, I think that at first people would be, like, kind of weird, and it wouldn't feel as exciting. Like, it wouldn't feel like a collegiate thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something to be said for walking onto a campus and seeing, like, the strolling, or the big green lawns and the trees. You're like, oh, I'm on a campus. This is so collegiate. Like, I feel the same way about seeing, like, the cheerleaders and the band in their uniform. It's, like, part of that collegiate experience to me. That being said, I think that's just because it's tradition. And so if it were gone, like the cheerleaders were gone, I think it would be weird at first, but after a while, everybody would get used to the new tradition, and it wouldn't be seen as, like, a detractor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't really think that they're necessary. And so now I was trying to think about, like, at Purdue or at bigger schools like Alabama, talking about the home field advantage and getting the crowd involved. So I know about Alabama because one of my good friends, she grew up in Alabama, and if she didn't go to Duke, she probably would have gone to Auburn. But she had... But she has a ton of friends who did club cheerleading with her and then went to Alabama. Okay. And so when Alabama played Duke our senior year, she was like, oh, all my friends. And, like, we went and talked to them after our halftime performance. And, like, there was a bazillion of them, and they, like, she knew them all. So I feel like she had a pretty good idea before coming to Duke what cheerleading would have been like for her if she had gone to Auburn or Bama. Because, so, like, older friends of hers had gone before, you know.
So you think at, like, bigger, more established, like, I'll say, like, more bigger universities, public universities that, like, put a lot of support and funding behind, like, their athletic programs, so like a Texas or LSU. Do you think on campuses like that, like, cheerleading serves a more integral role into the college?
So what I was going to say, so that's what I'm trying to wonder. Because most of those schools, their cheerleading program competes. So they could earn a scholarship, they compete, and it's just like any other sport. Mm-hmm. But they have this added component of, you have to be at a football game doing these things, you have to be at the basketball games doing those other things. But independent of that, they're still there for a purpose, and that's to compete in their athletic pursuit, just like anyone else. So I'm wondering, you know, thinking about the concept of adding to the atmosphere, if, like, the LSU cheerleaders really do contribute more cheers and gets the whole stadium going, or if, like, there's 50,000 people there, they're loud and crazy regardless of what the cheerleaders are doing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've never really experienced a big football stadium with cheerleaders like that as a fan. Like, I've been, when we play against UNC, I've been to UNC Stadium. I see the UNC cheerleaders on the other side, and they're, like, doing stunts so they can interact with the crowd more. Yeah. But I'm on the other side of the field. I'm at field level. I'm focused on cheering to the Duke section. You know, like, I'm not really paying a whole lot of attention of, like, are these Tar Heels things really being driven by the cheerleaders holding up the signs, or do they happen a bunch otherwise even when the cheerleaders aren't doing that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like hard for me to say.
I would say it happens like regardless of the cheer.
Yeah, I would imagine that it happens regardless.
I've been a spectator in like the Ding Dome, in like the football stadium, and
at the national championship, right? You were at the not last year, but the year prior in Tampa at the football national championship, NCAA's.
That was Alabama.
That you were at Alabama?
No,
I thought it was in Tampa.
It was in Tampa, but it was between Clemson and Alabama.
Right, so you would know you were someone in the stands.
Yeah, but I would say like it always starts with like it's very similar to what you were talking about like in Cameron, where like you get a sense of like the crowd and like what they're leaning towards as a cheer, and like you kind of not latch on, but like you kind of drive, like pick it up, and then you start to drive the car a little bit.
Yeah,
it's very similar to that, where like the cheerleaders they kind of get a sense of like this is a big moment, or like this is what our team is, this is what the crowd is leaning towards, and so that drives a lot of the cheers.
Yeah, but it's like if the cheerleaders weren't there doing that, it's not like the crowd would be silent, and it's not like there would be no organized chanting.
No,
like there would still be some roll tides, like.
And I think fans are.
I have to put that in there. Too many roll tides, now I'm gonna get in trouble.
So I would say that like definitely, I think especially the collegiate level. A lot of the tradition and a lot of going to the games is knowing the cheers and like participating and like having it be like a home field advantage. And even if the cheerleaders weren't down there doing their thing, like the fans would still.
Well, because I just have to imagine. Like I understand for like your typical high school gym that has bleachers up to so high. If you have a girl on your shoulders, you can kind of interact with the top of the bleachers. But some of these stadiums with 50,000 people, I'm just throwing that number out. I don't know how much these stadiums. That's
probably on the lower end.
I mean, when we were at the national championship for basketball, there was like 100,000 people in the stands. And I know because they put that number up, and I took a picture because I was like, oh my god, so many people. But so my point is, after you get like you're sitting 20 or 30 feet up. Can't really hear them anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason why the refs on the field, the refs have the little microphone. Because people are too far away to hear what's going on. Like, there's a reason why you don't hear, the quarterback calling out, like, hut, hut, or whatever they say, like, because they're too far away. So, I kind of feel like the cheerleaders, even if you were making the argument that they are interacting with the crowd, in a lot of these bigger schools, the crowd that they're interacting with is only a small proportion of the actual crowd.
Yes.
So, and the people at the top are just as loud as the people at the bottom. Like, it's not like they're just sitting there quietly.
Watch this game.
Yeah, like, they're just as embroiled in the atmosphere. So that kind of, I think we've come to an agreement, but I think that begs the question then, what about NFL cheerleaders? And I will say, I've never seen...
So I don't think, what is...
you don't think we've come to...
What is I would say that we don't need cheerleaders.
Yeah, I think that's what I've been saying too.
Alright, cool. I just want to make sure we're on the same page, because it was not clear to me that we had to come to...
Sorry, so...
NFL cheerleaders?
Yeah, because I've only been to one that I remember. I may have been to two, but I think only one NFL football game, and that was a Broncos game. And granted, I was really far up. But I don't have the impression that NFL cheerleaders are actual cheerleaders in terms of, like, starting the chants. I really feel that they're much closer to, like, a college dance team. So they still have palms, but it's much more of a dancer team. Mm-hmm. And it's often to, like, whatever music is coming on the loudspeaker.
Yes.
And so to me, like, if you're going to argue a need for cheerleaders as anything more than a sport in and of itself, then you got to be having the argument of they add to the atmosphere and they're leading cheers. And so in NFL, I don't think that they're leading cheers.
No.
At all.
And I think, like, and it's well documented that like NFL cheerleaders, they are exploited. Like they don't have very good health benefits. They don't get paid very well. Like
yeah, it's usually something you do because you love to do it and not like you have other jobs. Like this isn't your spare time type thing.
And they like it takes like a lot. It not only takes a lot of time and coordinating, but they put a lot of restrictions in terms of like these weight demands and like you have to look a certain way with your body and like body image issues.
Well, and so again, that to me gets less at like, oh, your body is strong and muscular because we're asking you to do this athletic thing. It's like, we're just out here to have hotties dancing around. And to me, that gets back to like the roots of where cheerleading came from, which is like maybe not the best intentioned thing. So, yeah, I don't think there's really much a need for NFL cheerleaders. And if we were to do away with one of them, I would say NFL cheerleading should be gone first. Because at least collegiate cheerleading, you can kind of make the argument that they try to lead the cheers. And most collegiate teams also compete. But like that's a separate thing. So
yeah, I completely separate like the cheerleaders that are on the field leading cheers as opposed to competition.
I guess so we're separating from the competition, but most schools that allow stunting, like you need to be in a particular amount of shape to safely throw somebody up in the air and safely catch them. Yes. And likewise, you need to be in a particular amount of shape to be thrown in the air, know where you are, and then try to land as safely as possible, especially if they don't end up catching you. So I think there are arguments to be made for you need to have a certain amount of athletic ability or training, and that the body type that meets those demands may not necessarily be slim with big boobs. Do you know what I mean? So, like, you can make the argument that you need to have a specific body type, but it's not necessarily going to be the quote-unquote hottie body type. Whereas in NFL cheerleading, none of those girls are going to be able to pick someone up and throw them and catch them. Like, they're not... That's not the training that they're going... They don't do those things, so they're not trained to do them. Yeah. So they're not being chosen to build a certain athletic build for a purpose. They're chosen for their build based on a subjective visual appeal as opposed to... So my point is that sometimes you can have a muscular body that's been trained for a purpose that may not also be visually in line with the culture's like definition of what's the hottest thing out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. It definitely makes sense.
So I feel like it's way more... The sexism has no transparency. It's like completely transparent in NFL, whereas in cheerleading it's like kind of hidden by like, oh, well, we kind of throw, you know what I mean? Like, but I feel like there's nothing you can hide behind in NFL. It's just like blatantly pretty girls in little skirts dancing around. Or little shorts. Some cute boots. And I really like their outfits, but like... I feel like...
Oh, no.
Well, the Broncos have a little fringe. I love the little fringe.
Well, it was actually like... So, Dominique Foxworth was on... he's a personality on ESPN. And he does a Sunday morning show called The Morning Roast. And, like, on the show, he talks about the fact that, like, he has a little girl. And, like, she's getting to the age where she can do both, like, sports or cheerleading. Mm-hmm. And, like, he is definitely trying to, like, direct her to, like,
other
the sports. As, a, like,
because cheerleading can be a sport.
Yes.
But there is this other aspect to it that I think plays into why a lot of girls that maybe didn't do a lot of sports, they get to high school and they try out or middle school and try out for cheerleading because of the status and because of being seen. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think it's very different if you've been brought up doing cheerleading or tumbling as a sport and want to continue doing it as a sport because you enjoy flipping through the air versus I want to do this and get into it because of the status or I want to like date hot boys or like whatever they think they're going to get
through being associated with
right.
Well, I would definitely want my daughter to be in the sport and not just be a cheerleader.
So what if she did the sport and then also was a cheerleader at sporting events? Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say, hey, you can't not be a cheerleader. Your mom was a cheerleader. In theory, your mom,
yeah,
you can't say no, you're not gonna.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't feel comfortable saying no. You can't be a cheerleader.
Yeah.
But I feel I'm kind of hitting on another note. I feel like these athletic departments and universities are kind of trying to get the most bang for their buck in terms of using their competition cheerleading squads and also putting them on the football fields.
So how's that getting most bang for their buck?
Because if you have these student athletes or if you have these student athletes, let's call them student athletes, and they're just they have these wonderful talents that they're practicing for, and they compete in the spring semester.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the fall semester, they're still working out, but why shouldn't we also have them come to our football games and be
raise the
atmosphere
a little bit?
Okay. Have an entertainment component there.
That makes more sense. Yes. I was trying to understand what you were trying to say, because the first thing I thought of is well, if they don't have to be at football games, that's, they don't have to buy that type of shoe. They don't need 5 different uniforms. They only need 2 per year. They don't need all this other stuff. They don't need flags. They don't need signs. Because a lot of those things are not used in the competition cheerleading. So I saw it as there's all these things we need to have for football games and basketball games and all this travel associated with football and basketball games.
Well,
we'd save all this money if we didn't do that.
They don't travel I don't think they travel to away games.
So I don't know about other schools. Every school is different. At Duke, the varsity squad cheers at every home football game, and half of the squad goes to every away football game. So it's not the same half. It's there's 6 home games and 6 away games. I'm going to these 3. You're going to those 3. Mm-hmm. But at every football game, there is a cheerleader, 6 cheerleaders at least being sent. Mm-hmm. For basketball, the only away games we travel to are during tournaments. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about, at Duke, you can just put the cheerleaders on the same flight or same bus or whatever, or usually same flight if it's long, but we'd have a different bus. And if you're getting the band out there, maybe you could argue 20 more seats in the... it's not adding any more cost if you're already sending out the band.
Well, I would also say, depending on your athletic department, whatever you can do to make the atmosphere as best as possible. That's going to be driving the revenue for
because and that's a good point. I know that as cheerleaders, we also had we attended some lacrosse games, some tennis tournaments, indoor tennis. That's how I knew what the inside of the tennis was like. It's because I went there. We had to go as a cheerleader. And volleyball games.
So there are specific.
So that does make sense. Where it's we're trying to increase the atmosphere.
Yeah, and we want to get the most we
already have a vehicle to do it on campus. Yeah.
All right. So I think we're good. Are you good? You have anything else you want to add?
I kind of wanted to talk about my brilliant idea about the cheerleaders teams, NFL, as a separate sport going on, but I guess...
Sure. All right. Well, hold on. We have dun 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 breaking news. Hattie has an idea. This is the first I'm hearing of this.
This is the second you're hearing of it, but I stopped myself very shortly through. So we came up with this topic because we heard something on the radio talking about it, or the stuff in the news, and we kind of had, I think we were in the car, and we had a very short, 2 or 3 minute discussion, so what do you think? Do you think cheerleading is necessary at things like other sporting events? Why or why not? And then I kind of went into this big spiel, just on spur of the moment, coming up with an idea of how to fix this problem, so that it's not just cheerleaders being there to be little skirts, good-looking girls dancing around. Mm-hmm. But then after 2 minutes of talking about it, we were both oh, this is a good topic for the podcast. Mm-hmm. let's save it for the podcast. Because it's not fun to talk something through and then come back and talk it all through again. So
I actually
don't
think
know,
vaguely.
Do you
kind
remember
of vaguely,
kind of?
But keep going.
Okay, so what... I have to remember now. But what I was thinking was, I do think it's just like it's entertaining to watch a dance performance, it's entertaining, at least to me, to watch a cheerleading performance or like a tumbling performance. But I think that part of the... Hey, Amelia, over here. It's okay if I'm just doing this. Part of the kind of misogynistic component comes from the fact that they're just there dancing and not really doing anything else. Whereas if it was a competition, not only do I think now it's there for a purpose, and the purpose is not solely to entertain other people, but also to compete, I think that gives them another purpose, but also gets people more interested in watching them, right? Like, I find it a lot more interesting to watch something that maybe I don't know much about if I'm like, ooh, this is a competition, right? So I was thinking that maybe instead of, like, take NFL, instead of it just being there and they dance to canned music, it's like at the halftime, then the home team cheerleader gets 10 minutes to give their performance and they get judged and rated, and like there's like stuff that tells the audience, and like maybe there's an audience component of like loudness or whatever to get people interested and invested, and then a visiting team has 10 minutes to give like a rebuttal and like they give their performance, or maybe they have like 8 minute long performances, and then they have like short performances. It's more of like a face-off type something, but like you have a separate set of judges, and like you have stuff that you can display, and like it's all exciting, and it's a whole competition in and of itself. It just happens to be taking place at the same time as the football game, but maybe like during halftime or something, so it's not at the same time, to kind of fill in the gaps.
And actually, like, add an entertainment value and competition value.
Competition value, right. I just thought that would be really cool, and I guess in the car we had talked about, like, what happens in the playoffs, right? Because if the Broncos make it to the playoffs, but the Broncos cheerleaders have consistently been scoring lower than the others, they shouldn't go to the playoffs. And I was kind of like, well, yeah, because if now they're not... I mean, in NFL they weren't before directing any chance. There's no need that the two football teams in the playoffs need to match the two cheerleading teams in the playoffs. There's no need at all, right? And it's only at the home games, like when, during the regular season, I guess I should say, that's when they can have their matches against everybody else in the conference, just like football does. And then they can enter into the playoff game, just like football does. And it's like, we have playoff game A in the tournament. We have the Bengals versus the Browns, and we have the Broncos versus, I don't know, the Miami Dolphins. Like, and like they can just have their own little playoffs, and it would be awesome. And then we could have like Super Bowl cheerleading champions. It would be great. And you could also then like influence the sport of cheerleading to meet these metrics, like, and get people more aware of the sport itself and involved and understand, oh yeah, they had a higher pyramid, or like they threw that girl and she did 1 trillion flips, whereas that other one just like went up and kicked her leg. Like, that doesn't seem as difficult. Like, oh, well, that one really went with the song, or like their song choice was so good and their choreography made everybody like get excited and into it, whereas that one song was kind of you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it would be a way to increase awareness about the sport and also provide more of that entertainment value, which is the purported rationale for having them. But yeah, I don't know. So it's not a fully vetted idea, but just...
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I'm thinking in my mind a bunch of roadblocks.
Oh, yeah, like, no one's going to want to have to pay more money for any of this.
Oh, yeah,
like,
and like the travel,
yeah. So, of course, there's...
And like you go to the playoffs, and then like your cheerleaders don't know like your team's cheers.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But it's NFL. The cheerleaders don't have cheers.
But they don't like know your music, so like
You don't have a band in NFL. It's all
but if it's coming through, like maybe your team has a certain song.
So you don't know about cheerleading. So this happens a lot in basketball too. It's just a song will come on. So we have, at least at Duke, we would have what are called shorts, which are just 4 to 6 8 counts of dances that can be done to any upbeat song. And so the captain, like a song comes on, and they're like, is this upbeat? Is this low beat? Like, which of our many shorts that we know would kind of look good with this? I'm going to choose X, right? And then it's like, okay, X. And then on the next number 1, like, everybody starts doing it. And so to the crowd, it looks like a choreographed dance to that song, when really it's just a dance. And the other thing is, oftentimes, especially, it's easier to coordinate at home games, but it would also be coordinated at like halftime of women's basketball games. The people running the arena and running the entertainment, choosing like which song are we going to play and pressing play, they come down and they talk to you. And they say, we're planning to do these 4 songs. Do you have any other suggestions? And so you could easily be like, well, yes, we're the Broncos cheerleaders. We request this, right? And then problem solved. So I didn't see that as a roadblock. I definitely more saw any cost associated with like the extra judges, and like how is this going to be making sure it's not interfering with the holy grail of life, football, like we can't, well, just take any commercial on TV. You think that's what it is for America. So I recognize there would be many roadblocks, and this is just a pipe dream, but I think it would be cool.
It's a very worthwhile, like, it could that flushed out. I definitely think can be very like.
And I think it would increase just like excitement and retention, right? Because then
it would give another reason for like fans to come out to the games.
Yeah. Which is, it can't hurt. Football.
Yeah, we're contributing to the holy grail.
Oh yeah. So okay, that is all.
All right. Well, I am William Jabbar Wright, and that is it.
That is what we are doing.
Deuces.